Christy, and Deborah. And they do have displays, so that will tell you more about what their work is about. But we're going to focus in on the situation of COVID in these last 3 years of COVID, and each is to respond on that. So could you just tell us very briefly what you are focused on and where, and what do you think, what challenges, and then, what challenges did the pandemic present to your work?
Hello, I'm Deb Parker. I'm Executive Director for Stand with Iraqi Christian. We have a display over there, so I'll be happy to talk to you in detail about the history and specific projects. But what I'm going to focus on is COVID. The coming into healing we're using as a metaphor because we don't do medical mission. And the metaphor means that I'll try to carry that thread all the way through as I move to COVID. The mission of SWIC is to offer friendship and financial assistance to Iraqi Christians and their communities as they work, I'll repeat the word they, as they work to restore peace, rebuild society, and secure a future for their children. SWIC was founded in 2015 as a response to ISIS. I won't go into ISIS, but all of you can conjure up the images of what the atrocities were that were happening due to ISIS's brutality in Iraq and other places. But I also want to bring out that Iraq is a complicated place. All of you know Jonah and Nineveh. The Nineveh plains are in northern Iraq. Imagine my surprise when I found out I was going to be called to do things in Nineveh plains. It was like, really? So God has been at work there from very ancient times, and it's clear. And the earliest Christian communities are located in Iraq. And so our response in part is to try and preserve those communities, to give them an opportunity to continue. I really have to thank Rebecca, because the World Health Organization definition of healing is something that I'm going to be using probably a lot into the future. That's where she said healing as a state of physical, mental, and social well-being. So think about how ISIS destroyed that. The persecution, they drove Christians from their homes, they became displaced. Everything was looted, burned, destroyed. The Christian communities had built up over a long time. And ISIS's impact is still felt today. So think about COVID then in that context of a land that was already suffering. By 2020, SWIC had already become accustomed to a way of operating that might be a little bit different than what the rest of you do. The way we operate is that we've always had relationships with field officers and with St. George's in Baghdad and the Diocese of Cyprus in the Gulf. And those relationships were often based on sending money and developing the use of communications. But a lot of things happen in Iraq. So even a well-planned mission trip, and I confess to being a planner, I can't help it, but a well-planned mission trip is something that often had to be changed at the last possible moment because there was a new attack because of the proxy war with Iraq, or with Iran, they were using Iraq, or something was happening with Syria or Turkey. So that whole region had made us, which had to become very adaptable. So using COVID and then the healing as a metaphor, I identified 3 impacts. One impact was that the chicken farms that we had been helping rebuild, restart on the Nineveh plain by giving them one-time grants, those were able to continue. Not because the government had any desire to help chicken farmers particularly, but all the international aid that Iraq depended on got shut down the same way everything got shut down in other countries. So they needed local food. And they would give the farmers, or the chicken farms, the Christian farmers from the chicken farms, passes to get into the towns. And everybody in the towns would benefit. So that was the first impact, and we had more farmers coming to us, and also sheep farmers saying, we want to restart, because it was the way they could make a living, even with COVID. The second is, we don't usually handle disaster relief. There are other agencies that do that. But we had one of our field officers who lived in Iraqi say, people are hungry, they can't get groceries. So we raised money, and we sent money to the field officer, and we're able to provide some groceries. It was a one-time project. It was different than our usual model of giving a single grant to help rebuild. But the third is what I'm going to wrap up with and give you a little more detail on. Because another, I would say, positive outcome is that during COVID, small businesses, restaurants, bakeries, construction workers, a laundry and tailor shop, they basically got shut down just like places in other countries got shut down. And as soon as COVID restrictions started to lift, they needed to restart yet again. And that restarting, they started coming to us asking, could we help fund them? So with $2,000, we then select various proposals that are sent to us by Christian business owners. And we have started to date 19 new businesses since spring of 2022. And that's incredible because each of those businesses are in a community that we've got Yazidis, and we've got Muslims, both Sunni and Shia. So the community impact, we aren't just lifting up the Christians and looking at their well-being. We are looking at helping raise up and the well-being of the whole community around them, so that others don't look and say, oh, the Christians are doing well, we want what they have. That would cause conflict. So just to kind of tie it back to our mission statement, SWC's mission is to restore peace. We can't do that alone, but we can help them restore peace, to rebuild society, that we're doing very directly, and secure a future for their children, which is what they've told us this is all about. So using that medical metaphor, I was talking to Buck Blanchard, who some of you know, he's one of our board members, and he's also co-chairperson this way. And I said, well, you know, I'm wondering where we are in that metaphor. We're not the doctors and the nurses, we're not the researchers. So maybe we're like the family and the friends who are supporting the people who had been so diseased, so ill due to all these circumstances. And he's like, maybe not. Maybe we're more like the medical supply people. We're providing time depressors and syringes and needles. They're asking for them. We're helping provide our resources for everybody's well-being.
Thank you. Challenges along the way, we're seeing silver linings with that as well, aren't we? It's not just all being bad, there's been good as well. Thank you. Thank you. Could you pass that to Benjamin? So could we hear from you just briefly what your work involves and how COVID has challenged that, as well as perhaps given some silver linings that none of us would know about, but you.
Good morning. As part of the GEM organization, I'm really privileged to be with you all and present our vision going forward, the vision of helping hands for hospitals. I will follow what we can see on the screen, so we will be able to have a better idea what happened. Everybody was hit with the tiny little virus, from the little baby to the geriatric person was affected by it. Hospitals, offices, businesses, everything. The first day, around April 2020, when I was called from the ICU to intubate a patient, I went and intubated the patient. Little I knew that this was a patient who was COVID positive, was just coming in picture. 2 hours after I came to the office, the secretary called me and said, "Look, your patient is COVID positive. Did he have a mask? Did he have a gown? I didn't have any of this. But the Lord protected me. I just wanted to say the scenario of how COVID affected every one of us. But today, COVID is changing communities, people, and actions of missions. Everything has changed. We are also. Before going into what happened to us during the COVID, I just wanted to give a few highlights of what helping him for hospital is about. I don't have to say anything about this word. We just read this. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. I'm sure many of you are challenged with that question. Gym members are every day probably giving the challenge to your community, and everybody is challenging you also. So we were also challenged by the same problem. There's a vast area of the medical work that is being really not well managed in developing countries like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, and several parts of South America and Africa. So, do we have a responsibility to that place, or that place, with that place? This was our challenge when we were meeting as a small fellowship to find out what best we can do. I would like to go to the next slide, which most of you are familiar with. Based on the Joshua Project progress scale, you see the population is divided into several criteria by which we define the percentage of the Christian work going on. And you see the red mark area, those are the places where the hardly any Christian work is going on. Do we have a responsibility to cover those areas? Most of India is red. I'm not going into the details of that. Our challenge was this. The church's ministry of healing is a continuation of and the missionary who was born in India will definitely know those two things. Ludhiana, Christian Medical College, Ludhiana, and Christian Medical College. So these two medical colleges were standing as pillars of Christian medical work, and that was a real institution through which the medical work was going, in addition to the gospel ministry that was going. Today, the scenario is different. Probably less than 200 hospitals or 300 hospitals, but most of them are in the ICU. It's a pathetic situation.
Has that been because of COVID? Has it gone down?
No, it is not because of the COVID. I'm coming to that.
Okay.
This is pre-COVID.
Okay.
I'll be brief. So these hospitals are on the ICU care. Yes, please. So these hospitals are in trouble. I tell you one thing: the hospitals will be the only place where the gospel will be heard soon, maybe all over the world, especially in India. The schools will be closed, colleges will be closed, and churches will be closed for the gospel. But you look at the emergency room, that's a place where there are a lot of people. You look at the churches, there are 4 people in the church where there are 400 people in the emergency room. So the gospel has to be preached in the. So, go ahead. So what happened was in 2016, 3 of our committed doctors and paramedical people met together in India in a town called Coimbatore in South India and decided that something has to be done about this. If we don't care for this hospital, that is going to be bad soon. So we decided to have an organization, and that is how Helping Hands for Hospital was born in 2006. So our journey was going from then on. So we have Yes. So this is a map of India where we see that most of the hospitals which are suffering are in the north. Many of the hospitals in the south are doing well. There's a vast majority of hospitals in the north are doing very badly. So, and during the COVID time, one of the good thing happened, as Helen was telling me, what happened out of the COVID. The good thing what happened out of the COVID is that some of the hospitals who never had a good ICU, we were able to build up an ICU. Some of the hospitals where they were never thinking of a ventilator, we were able to supply ventilators. So today, those hospitals who didn't have oxygen line, continuous oxygen supply, we are able to supply oxygen supply lines to or those infrastructure improvement. So, well, I think we are continuing our ministry, going and helping out different areas, visiting mission hospitals, conducting medical camps, and trying to help those ministry going on in a better way. Please do visit our website. We'll have more time to answer the questions. Thank you.
I know that India is one of those huge numbers that they don't know if they actually done several millions. Christy.
Helen. So my name is Christy Wallace. I'm the Executive Director of the Dominican Development Group. Several of our board members here, that makes me happy. And it makes me happy because we have a lot to learn about listening and learning before we go and before we send. And so our organization, for those of you who don't know, began when the Episcopal Church in the Dominican Republic was starting to experience a lot of growth in a short amount of time. Missionaries have been coming to the Dominican Republic, Episcopal mission teams have been coming to the Dominican Republic for years and years and years. And so one missionary in particular who was there full time was Dr. Bob Stevens. And Dr. Bob Stevens worked with the Episcopal Church. It wasn't like he was a missionary really from outside. He lived there. He really got to know the bishops and the priests. And so together they came up with a plan that would really help move the Dominican Episcopal Church from a place of dependency to a place of self-sufficiency. You can speak with Carlos later if you would like. He helps to lead this FOCA account, and basically that is an endowment that was created. They were very wise in their thinking, and they created an endowment so that that money could start to grow, so that in perpetuity they can pay for their clergy, they can pay for their mission. It was really, really wise, and I'm not a numbers person, so it really blows my mind. What also was happening is that a lot of full-time missionaries were coming to serve in the DR, and they did tremendous work together with the DDG and the Episcopal Church. It went from like 23 churches to over 70. And there's even more now. The Episcopal schools have grown. The ministries of the ECW, of the youth, they have all grown tremendously, and it was a beautiful thing to see. When the full-time missionaries came back to the States, because it was very obvious that all of this great work had been done, and so everything was in the great hands of the Episcopal Church on the island. It left a big void when those missionaries left in terms of the bridge building that the DDG does between stateside mission teams and the Dominican Episcopal Church. It was a transition for all of us because we had to think about, oh wait, Bob and Ellen Snow, they were doing these logistics. Karen Carroll was literally running everything, but now they're gone. So now what? Traditionally, the DDG has only had one employee, and the mission office and the Episcopal Church, they have one mission coordinator, but everyone was working together. So when they were removed, it was just the director of the DDG and just the one mission coordinator. And so that was, pre-COVID, and not too long before pre-COVID. So there was a challenge there to figure out how are we going to divide and conquer that group. So the amount of mission teams that were coming, they have kind of slowed down. And the priorities of the Dominican Episcopal Church had kind of slowed being fulfilled. And COVID happened, right? So that compounded that issue because now no teams could go. No one from the DDG, no one from the board, not the executive director, no one could go. And so that communication, that kind of challenge of figuring all of the logistics again, it stopped for a little bit. But that was a bonus. And I say that was a bonus because in the midst of growth, crazy amounts of growth, right? We stop really being in prayer and we stop really thinking about why we're doing what we're doing. And we can get lost in, oh man, we have this many mission teams and this many projects. Those are all wonderful things. But what COVID did allow us to do was to slow down, to be in prayer, to work with each other. My relationship with the mission office, I'm sure Ned and Mikaya probably are sick of hearing me call them and ask so many questions, but we've really developed a relationship of true friendship where we call and we complain to each other and we lift each other up and we're working together. And so I encourage you to think about how COVID has impacted you, but not just the negatives, but the positive. And that work is continuing to happen. And some people say, well, when are we going to go back to how we were? And what we've had to learn during that time of reflection is that there is no going back, only forward. And how we do that is through prayer and friendship and working together.
Thank you, Christy. That was wonderful. So I don't think I can take it because we'll start screaming. Thank you. So I went through COVID in the church situation and everything closing down, and I'm still working out how we're coming to move forward in that. I agree we're not coming back. So it's really great to hear different perspectives of what happened in COVID and the moving forward. And I had these questions now for you. Do you have any questions directly for the panelists right now? We will have time around tables, but what did you find helpful in what they said? Just very briefly, what did you find helpful? Yes.
Well, I'm sure you queued up this question, but it was just inspiring to hear that there were ways that you could reflect on positive things that came out of such a catastrophic challenging situation.
I wonder if it went on long enough that we had to.
As I listened, I just marveled that in every case it seems that all of your ministries were in some ways prepared for the changes and transitions and things that would need to happen during that time. And I've seen that in so many places around the church that we encountered a situation we never expected, and yet we had been given, your organization had already been formed, so and you were prepared to be able to help hospitals get the supplies that they needed, as opposed to trying to organize in the midst of COVID. So it's just a reminder that the kinds of organizing that we do when we're not in a crisis, prepares us to be able to respond when we are in a crisis. And so I just thank you all for the foresight that created these organizations.
Yeah.
Thank God.
So should we just spend possibly 10 minutes around our tables reflecting on what we heard as the prompt for both looking at the challenges that happened during that time for our own organisations and churches, and the silver linings that we're in. Maybe we do need still to open our eyes to what was happening, what God was doing in those times that we now move forward with today. Just spend some time around the tables. I'll call you back in about 10 minutes. Okay, thanks.